What kind of woman sends her husband a video of herself with another man, on purpose? You're probably already judging me. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But what if I told you? I wasn't always this person. And that video? It wasn't about revenge. It was a cry to be seen. To be heard. To remember who I used to be. Before I became invisible in my own marriage. We met on a rooftop in downtown Chicago. It was one of those perfect early summer evenings, warm air, golden light, and the hum of music floating in the background. I remember feeling electric that night. I wore a tight red dress, my favorite pair of heels, and a confidence I had worked hard to own. Antonio noticed me the moment I stepped onto the terrace. He was standing near the bar, glass in hand, talking with a few colleagues, but his eyes never left me. Later, he'd tell me I had a spark, something wild and impossible to ignore. He pursued me relentlessly, texted good morning before I even opened my eyes, showed up at my office with flowers, booked surprise weekend trips, said I made him feel alive. He called me magnetic, different, one of a kind, and at the time I believed him. He made me feel like I didn't have to shrink myself to be loved, like I could take up space, be loud, be bold, be seen. It's funny, isn't it? How sometimes people fall in love with your fire, but once they have it, they try to contain it. That's what happened with Antonio. First it was subtle, a comment here and there. Do you think that dress is a little much for dinner with my boss? Or, you're really posting that on Instagram? He'd laugh it off, say he was just being protective. And I wanted to believe him. But slowly my world started to shrink. Fewer nights out. Fewer bold choices. Less sparkle. More silence. And the saddest part? I didn't even notice it happening. Not right away. Because when you love someone, you tell yourself the compromises are small. You tell yourself it's just part of becoming a we. But here's the truth I wish I had known earlier. If someone loves you for your light, they shouldn't ask you to dim it. Real love doesn't demand your silence. It holds space for your shine. By the time I realized how much I'd changed, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. And one night, not long before it all came crashing down, I pulled out a black dress I hadn't dared to wear in months. That dress would become the spark that lit a fuse, and reveal just how much of me had disappeared. When people think about control in a relationship, they imagine yelling, accusations, rules barked like orders. But the truth? Most control doesn't come dressed like a monster. It comes in quiet, careful whispers. First it sounded like concern. Are you sure that top is appropriate for dinner with my coworkers? I just think people might get the wrong idea from that photo. Why do you need to go out so often when we could spend time together? Little things. Just suggestions. Or at least that's what I told myself. And so I adjusted. Swapped out the bold lipstick for a softer shade. Chose longer hemlines. Started turning down invitations from friends more than I accepted them. Antonio never had to raise his voice. He didn't need to. Because I was doing the silencing for him. I remember one night in particular. Jade had invited me out to a jazz bar downtown. She said, "Come on, Roxy, you need a night to breathe." But when I told Antonio, he raised an eyebrow and said, "Another girls' night? Don't you think you've had enough of those lately?" I stayed home. We watched Netflix. I smiled, laughed at his jokes, tucked my knees under a blanket and pretended everything was fine. But a small part of me felt hollow. Like I'd left a version of myself outside the door that night. And I never went back to pick her up. That's how microcontrol works. It doesn't demand submission. It invites you to choose it over and over until you forget you had a choice to begin with. And the scary part? From the outside, everything looked perfect. People saw us at brunch, holding hands, smiling for photos. But they didn't see the tiny negotiations I was making with myself every single day. What to wear? What to post? What parts of myself to mute? Here's the quiet truth I learned far too late. The erosion of identity doesn't happen all at once. It's chipped away, comment by comment, sigh by sigh, glance by glance, until one day you wake up and realize you've become unrecognizable to yourself. And that realization? It doesn't come with fireworks or a big moment. Sometimes it comes when you're just getting dressed for a night out, and you catch your own eyes in the mirror. And for the first time in a long time, you miss yourself. That's exactly what happened to me. The The night I pulled out the black dress. Confidence doesn't vanish overnight. It slips away softly, like air leaking from a balloon. You don't always hear it. But one day you realize you can't lift yourself off the ground the way you used to. Before Antonio, I used to love getting ready in the morning, picking outfits that made me feel bold, snapping photos just because I felt good in my skin, posting them with playful captions, not for attention, but because I was proud of who I was. But slowly I started second-guessing everything. I'd hold up a dress and hear his voice in my head. Isn't that a little much? I'd start writing a caption, then delete it, or crop a photo just a little tighter so no one could misinterpret it. I told myself it was maturity, that I was evolving, that maybe this was what married life was supposed to look like. Quieter version of me. But it wasn't maturity. It was self-erasure. And what made it worse? I kept justifying it to myself. Like the time I wanted to buy a new blazer for a job interview, something sleek and structured, something that made me feel powerful. Antonio raised an eyebrow and said, "Do you really need another one? We're supposed to be saving for a house, remember?" Meanwhile, a week later he brought home a new set of golf clubs. "Got a deal from a buddy," he said. I didn't say anything. I just folded up the receipt for the blazer I never bought and tucked it into my desk drawer. That's the thing about confidence. It's not just about how you look. It's about how you feel you're allowed to take up space. And in that relationship, I started believing I wasn't allowed much at all. Here's a lesson I wish I could tell every woman who's ever started to second-guess herself. When you begin to shrink your light to make someone else feel more comfortable, you're not being kind. You're being erased. And by the time you notice it, it might already feel too late. That's how I felt. Until one Friday night, after months of making myself smaller, Jade and Tatum called and said, "We don't even recognize you anymore." And they were right. That's the night I stood in front of my closet, took a deep breath, and reached for the black dress I had hidden in the back, the one I hadn't dared to wear since the wedding. It had been sitting in the back of my closet for months. This little black dress. Tight, low-cut in the front, just enough leg to feel bold but not bare. It wasn't scandalous. It was me. Or at least the version of me I used to be. I had bought it on a whim during a solo shopping trip, back when I still did things like that. Back when I didn't second-guess every purchase, wondering if it would be too much for someone else's comfort. I hadn't worn it. Not once. Because I knew deep down Antonio would hate it. But that night after Jade texted me, "Come out with us. You need this." Something shifted. I pulled the dress out from the hanger like I was unsheathing a sword, put it on, stared at myself in the mirror and whispered, "Still in there. She's still in there." And then, he walked in. Antonio wasn't supposed to be home yet. But the moment he saw me, lipstick half applied, heels on, dress hugging curves, his entire energy changed. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. But his tone cut deeper than any scream ever could. "You're wearing that out? Calm. Cold. Condescending." I tried to stay light. "It's just drinks with the girls." His reply, "Where?" "A strip club." I felt my stomach tighten. And then came the line I'd heard in too many forms before. "You're dressing like you're single. Like you want attention." That was the moment something snapped. Not in an explosive way, more like the final thread finally gave out. All the silent compromises, all the little okay fineness, all the things I didn't say just to keep the peace. They came rushing up like a wave I could no longer hold back. I turned to him, heart racing, and said something I didn't plan. "So what if someone notices me? Am I supposed to be invisible for the rest of my life? Except to you?" He flinched. Just slightly. Then stepped back into his script. "Married women should have self-respect. That dress is asking for the wrong kind of attention." Here's the thing no one tells you about emotional control. Doesn't always sound like anger. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Like protectiveness. But if what they're protecting is their idea of you, not who you truly are, then it's not love. It's possession. I turned back to the mirror and applied that bright red lipstick with steady hands. A small rebellion. A quiet declaration. "I'm still here." He stared at me through the mirror. And I stared back. And I said, without even thinking, "Well, maybe I do want attention." That was it. That was the boiling point. And when I picked up my purse and walked out that door, my heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I didn't know it then, but I was walking straight into the eye of a storm. The air outside felt different that night. Crisper. Lighter. Like something inside me had finally cracked open just enough to let the breeze back in. I texted Jade on the way. Need extra shots tonight. Don't ask. She replied instantly. The old Roxy is back. When I pulled up to the curb outside Lux Lounge, Jade and Tatum were waiting, all sparkles and smiles. And the moment they saw me step out of the Uber in my black dress, they squealed. Girl, look at you. Jade hugged me tight. Tatum laughed. Antonio actually let you out like that? I rolled my eyes. I didn't ask for permission. Felt good to say that. Almost rebellious. Almost like I meant it. Inside, the music was pulsing through the walls. Familiar beats, bodies swaying, the rhythm of being young and untethered. Tatum handed me a shot without asking. To Roxy's jailbreak, she toasted. I threw it back. Let it burn its way through the tension still curled in my chest. We danced. We laughed. We took selfies. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't analyze the angle of my photo to make sure my neckline looked respectable. I didn't overthink my caption. I didn't pause before hitting post. I just existed. Fully. Freely. Without apology. Here's what I learned that night. Something I didn't realize I'd forgotten. You don't have to disappear to be loved. You don't have to tone yourself down to be accepted. And wanting to feel alive doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. But with every drink, with every story posted, with every moment I felt a little more like me, I also felt a quiet echo behind the music, a whisper that I was walking a line. And then, he appeared. Tall, sandy-haired, leaning against the bar with a soft smile that said, I see you. Tatum nudged me. He's been staring at you for 20 minutes. I glanced down at my wedding ring. It suddenly felt heavier than usual. I'm married, I whispered. But Jade just laughed. Your husband is probably home zooming in on your selfies with a magnifying glass. We all laughed. And maybe it was the tequila, or the months of emotional starvation, or just the warmth of being noticed again. But I walked over. Hi, I said, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. I'm Roxy. Bradley, he said, offering his hand. Finance guy by day, cocktail critic by night. He was charming in that effortless way. Not overbearing, not trying too hard. Just present. And in a way I hadn't felt in months. I felt seen. We talked. About music, travel, favorite drinks. He asked questions, real ones. Not who's that guy in the background of your photo, but what made you get into event planning? If you could go anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be? And I answered. Honestly. Freely. It felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. One drink turned into two. Two turned into tequila shots. And somewhere in the buzz of conversation and low lighting and the bass vibrating beneath us, I started to forget the weight on my finger. Not because I didn't love Antonio, but because I didn't love who I'd become with him. There's a difference. We don't talk about that enough, do we? The kind of cheating that starts not with lust, but with loneliness. Not with desire, but with invisibility. Here's something I wish more people understood. Infidelity doesn't always begin in the bedroom. Sometimes it begins in silence, in unanswered needs, in the aching absence of feeling desired, or heard or valued. Bradley leaned in closer. Want to get out of here? His hand brushed mine. My head was spinning, whether from the alcohol or the attention I wasn't sure. I paused, just long enough to hear the small voice in the back of my mind. You can still walk away. You can still call Jade, grab an Uber, go home. This doesn't have to be a chapter in your story. But the louder voice said something else. You've been a good wife. A quiet wife. A small wife. Just this once, be a woman who chooses herself. So I said yes. His apartment was sleek, minimalist, cold. He poured us drinks. Turned on a playlist that sounded like Temptation set to a beat. And somewhere between the second sip and the first kiss, I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I told myself it wasn't real. That I was just acting out. That I didn't mean it. But my body didn't know the difference. And then, Bradley reached for his phone. First I didn't notice, but when I did, he was already recording. "What are you doing?" I asked, half laughing, half nervous. "Memorializing the moment," he said with a smirk. I should have stopped it. Should have gotten dressed. Should have run. But instead, something darker in me, the hurt, the resentment, the quiet rage, decided to lean in. I even gave him Antonio's number, jokingly, recklessly, and when he said, "Want me to send it to him?" I laughed and said the words that would echo in my mind for months. "Watch this." That night wasn't just about Bradley. It was about trying to feel powerful again by doing something destructive, trying to feel seen by burning the bridge behind me. But when the sun came up the next morning, power was the last thing I felt. I woke up to a sunbeam cutting through unfamiliar blinds. For a moment I didn't remember where I was. The sheets smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. My dress was crumpled on the floor. And then it all came rushing back. The bar. The drinks. Bradley's smirk. The phone. The video. I sat up so fast the room spun. My head pounded, my mouth was dry, and my heart felt like it had been dropped from a rooftop. Where was my phone? I found it at the bottom of my purse, next to a receipt I didn't remember signing. 47 missed calls. 3 voicemails. A single text from Antonio that hit harder than a scream. "Don't come home." I froze. Had I really done it? Had I actually hit send? I opened the message thread, and there it was. The video. Timestamp 2:34 a.m. Sent from my phone. To my husband. In the video I was smiling, looking straight into the camera. And then I said it. He could know. Go ahead and send it. There was no mistaking the intent. I wasn't drunk enough to have forgotten. Just drunk enough to have destroyed everything. Here's the dangerous truth about emotional pain. Sometimes we want to be seen so badly we don't care if it's in flames. And in that moment I didn't just light a match. I dropped it on everything I had built. I got dressed in silence. Didn't say goodbye to Bradley. Didn't even look back. I sat in the back of the Uber, mascara smudged, lips dry, fingers trembling. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering why someone in last night's dress was silently crying at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. I could have told him. Could have said, I just blew up my marriage. And I didn't even do it with love. I did it with rage. I thought about texting Jade, about asking her if I could stay at her place, about calling my mom and pretending it was a mistake. But no excuse would erase what I'd done. The truth is, I wanted Antonio to hurt. I wanted him to feel the way I had been feeling. Invisible. Dismissed. Not enough. But watching him pack his duffel bag, seeing the way he looked through me like I was a stranger, that wasn't satisfying. It was shattering. He didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. He just asked me one question. Do you hate me that much? And I didn't have an answer. 'Cause maybe I didn't hate him. Maybe I hated the version of myself I had become trying to keep him. Here's the hardest truth of all. You can burn down a house in seconds, but you can't unsay the words that lit the fire. And sometimes when the smoke clears, there's nothing left worth saving. I thought that was the worst of it. But I was wrong. 'Cause what came next wasn't just a broken marriage. It was public shame. A brother-in-law. A screenshot. And a video that would spread like wildfire. I used to think heartbreak was private. Something that happened behind closed doors, in whispered fights, and tears cried quietly into a pillow. But this was public. This was digital. This was humiliating. Antonio didn't just leave. He made sure people knew why. I remember the moment Jade looked up from her phone, her face pale. Roxy, did Marco post something? Marco, Antonio's older brother. The one who never really liked me. She held out her screen, and there it was. A screenshot, taken straight from the video. My face mid-laugh, makeup smudged. Captioned, "This is what a cheater looks like." My brother deserved better. There were already dozens of comments. People from our neighborhood. Old classmates. Even coworkers. Some were harsh. Some were cruel. But most were just loud. And I had no voice in the conversation. The video itself didn't surface, thank God. But the damage was done. By Sunday morning, I had an email from HR. Subject line: urgent, employment termination notice. Apparently my personal conduct was inconsistent with company values. They didn't need the whole video. Just a screenshot was enough. And just like that, I lost my job, my income, my stability. My parents stopped taking my calls. Marco had already sent them the image. My mom's text was short: "We raised you better than this." Here's the thing about shame in the age of social media. It doesn't wait for the full story. It doesn't care about context, or nuance, or emotional abuse. It just spreads. Fast. Loud. Unforgiving. I tried to reach Antonio. Called. Texted. Even made new accounts when he blocked me. But nothing. No response. No space for apology. Just silence. And that silence was deafening. I sat on my kitchen floor with Jade and Tatum that night, passing a half-empty bottle of wine between us. "I can't believe he's throwing away our whole marriage over one night," I said, my voice cracking. Jade looked at me gently but firmly. "Roxy, you didn't just make a mistake. You sent him a video of you with another man." I stared at her, the weight of it hitting again. "I know," I whispered. "I just didn't think it would end like this." Would he have forgiven me if I hadn't sent the video? Would we be in therapy right now trying to rebuild? I'll never know. Because I didn't just cross the line. I made sure he saw it happen. And not just him. Everyone. Sometimes the punishment doesn't come from the person you hurt. It comes from the world watching, judging, screenshotting, never asking why you were crying behind the smile. I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing Antonio. But what I really lost was everything that used to ground me. My career, my reputation, my community, my family, all because of one moment, one video, one choice. And yet, even after everything crumbled, there was still a voice in me that whispered, "This wouldn't have happened if he hadn't made you feel so invisible." For weeks after everything collapsed, I lived in a strange emotional limbo. One part of me was drowning in regret, and another part was still building a case for why it wasn't entirely my fault. I'd say things like, if he hadn't been so controlling, I wouldn't have felt so trapped. If he really loved me, he would have fought harder to understand. And some of those things were true. Antonio was controlling. He did chip away at my confidence. He didn't show up emotionally the way I needed him to. But none of that erased what I did. And deep down I knew it. You see, that's the difference between a justification and accountability. A justification says, "I had no choice." Accountability says, "I made the wrong choice even if I was hurting." It's easy to point fingers outward. At the cold husband, the judgmental brother-in-law, the internet mobs. But when the dust settles, you still have to live with the reflection in the mirror. I remember one night, sitting alone in the apartment that was now echoing with silence, scrolling through old photos. Our wedding day, vacation in Lake Tahoe, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and messy buns. All of it felt like a life someone else had lived. And in that moment I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for weeks. If the roles were reversed, would I have forgiven him? If Antonio had sent me a video of him with another woman, laughing, smirking, looking right into the camera and hitting send, would I have stayed? The truth? No. I would have walked away too. That realization hit harder than anything Marco posted. Harder than losing my job. Harder than the judgment. Because for the first time, I stopped defending myself and started owning what I had done. Here's the hard-earned lesson. Pain explains behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. You can be hurting and still be wrong. You can feel justified and still be responsible. And once I accepted that, something surprising happened. The shame didn't grow. It softened. Because once I stopped fighting the truth, I could start facing it. And maybe, just maybe, start rebuilding from it. That's where healing really began for me. Not with denial, not with blame, but with the quiet courage to say, I did this, I own it, and I will do better. In the end, I lost almost everything. My marriage, my job, my sense of security, my image in the eyes of people I once thought would stand by me. And for a while that loss consumed me. I wanted to rewind time, to undo the choices, to unsend the video, to be someone I could be proud of again. But the truth is, there is no going back. Only through. What I lost was real. But what I gained, in the wreckage, was something I never expected. Clarity. I finally saw the full picture of who I had become, and who I never wanted to be again. I realized that shrinking myself to preserve a relationship is just a slower way of losing everything. That pretending to be okay isn't the same as peace. And that no amount of outside validation, no flirtation, no attention, no one-night rebellion, can fix the emptiness that grows when you abandon yourself. Here's the quiet truth I carry with me now. There is no freedom in revenge. Only more cages. There is no power in hurting someone who once loved you, because in the end it hurts you too. These days I'm learning to rebuild. It's not glamorous. There are no dramatic comebacks. Just small moments of truth. Apologizing sincerely, even if forgiveness never comes. Looking in the mirror and choosing not to flinch. Reconnecting with friends not to distract myself, but to rediscover the parts of me that are still worth loving. I still get judged. I still get reminded. But I also get to choose differently now. And if you're listening to this, maybe you're standing at your own edge, between who you are and who you're afraid of becoming. So let me leave you with this. Don't wait until you've lost everything to start telling yourself the truth. You deserve to be loved without disappearing. You deserve to be seen without having to scream. And you are allowed to walk away from anything that asks you to be less than who you are. Even if that anything once wore a wedding ring. If this story resonated with you even just a little, I invite you to share it. Comment below, subscribe, and tell me. Have you ever felt like you were fading in your own life? You're not alone. And it's not too late to come back to yourself.